This is a video reviewer for the Certified Public Accountant Licensure examination. This is CPA Reviewer number 6, featuring questions on Regulatory Framework for Business Transactions, or RFBT. There are 10 questions featured in this reviewer. All questions are modeled on actual questions that appeared on previous CPA Board exams. Before you proceed, please don't forget to subscribe to Review Central and click the bell icon to make sure you are notified of all new reviewers and other important updates. Let's begin.
Question number 1.
Which of the following elements is essential for the formation of a valid contract under Philippine law? A. Good faith. B. Written agreement. C. Consent of the parties. D. An oral agreement only. The correct answer is C. Consent of the parties. Under Philippine laws, consent of the parties is an essential element of a valid contract, meaning that all parties involved must willingly and knowingly agree to the contract terms. Consent must be given freely and without any form of coercion, mistake, fraud, undue influence, or intimidation. Each party must fully understand and agree to the obligations, rights, and responsibilities outlined in the contract. Consent is achieved through an offer by one party and an acceptance by the other. If consent is found to be defective, for instance, if one party was misled or forced, the contract may be deemed voidable. This requirement ensures that contracts are entered into voluntarily, protecting the rights of all parties involved. Under Article 1318 of the Civil Code of the Philippines, a valid contract requires 3 essential elements: consent of the parties, an object certain, and a lawful cause. Therefore, without consent, a contract cannot be formed.
Question number 2.
What is the effect of a void contract? A. It is binding upon the parties. B. It can be ratified by mutual agreement. C. It has no legal effect and cannot be ratified. D. It is enforceable only by one party. The correct answer is C. A void contract is as though it never existed, and it creates no legal obligations on the parties. Void contracts cannot be ratified, as they are inherently invalid. A void contract is an agreement that lacks legal effect from the outset, meaning it is as though the contract never existed. Under Philippine law, a void contract creates no legal rights or obligations for any party involved. Since it is invalid by nature, neither party can enforce it or claim any rights under it. A contract can be void for various reasons, such as lacking an essential element, such as consent, object, or cause, involving illegal activities, or violating public policy. Because it has no legal force, the parties are not bound to perform any obligations, nor can they seek legal remedies if the terms are not fulfilled.
Question number 3.
In the context of partnerships, when is a partnership considered dissolved? A. When a partner dies. B. When a partner withdraws capital. C. Upon the admission of a new partner. D. Only through a formal legal dissolution process. The correct answer is A. In a partnership, the death of a partner generally leads to the dissolution of the partnership. This is because a partnership is a personal business arrangement based on mutual agreement, trust, and contributions among partners. When one partner passes away, the relationship fundamentally changes, disrupting the balance of ownership, decision-making, and liability. Upon a partner's death, the partnership may be dissolved automatically unless an agreement or provision in the partnership contract specifies otherwise, such as a clause for continuation or succession. In cases with such provisions, the partnership may continue with the remaining partners or with the deceased partner's heirs or representatives, depending on the terms agreed upon beforehand.
Question number 4.
Which of the following is not a necessary requisite for negotiability under the Negotiable Instruments Law? A. It must be in writing and signed by the maker or drawer. B. It must be conditional on future events. C. It must contain an unconditional promise or order to pay. D. It must be payable on demand or at fixed future time. The correct answer is B. It must be conditional on future events. Under the Philippine Negotiable Instruments Law, being conditional on future events is not a necessary requisite for negotiability. In fact, negotiable instruments must be unconditional. For an instrument to be negotiable, it must contain a clear, definite promise or order to pay a specific amount of money without being dependent on any external conditions or future events. If the promise to pay depends on a future event, the certainty of payment becomes compromised, making the instrument unreliable for transfer or exchange as a substitute for money. Therefore, negotiable instruments are required to be payable on demand or at a fixed or determinable future time, ensuring predictability and facilitating their use in commerce as trusted, easily transferable financial instruments.
Question number 5.
Which of the following is correct regarding the liability of partners in a general partnership? A. Partners have limited liability for partnership obligations. B. Partners are only liable for their individual acts. C. Partners have joint and several liability for partnership obligations. D. Partners are liable only to the extent of their capital contributions. The correct answer is C. Partners have joint and several liability for partnership obligations. This means each partner is individually, severally, and collectively, jointly, responsible for the debts and liabilities of the partnership. Creditors can pursue any one partner or all partners together to satisfy a partnership debt, regardless of each partner's share in the partnership. If one partner is sued and pays the debt, they may seek reimbursement from the other partners. However, creditors are not required to distribute the liability evenly among partners. They can demand full repayment from any single partner. This joint and several liability underscores the importance of trust and shared risk in a partnership, as each partner's personal assets may be at stake to satisfy partnership obligations.
Question number 6.
Under the Civil Code, when may a minor ratify a contract entered into during minority? A. Anytime during minority. B. Upon reaching the age of majority. C. Only with parental consent. D. After receiving court approval. The correct answer is B. Upon reaching the age of majority. Under the Philippine Civil Code, contracts entered into by a minor, that is, someone below 18 years of age, are generally considered voidable. This means that such contracts are legally binding and enforceable unless the minor, upon reaching the age of majority, chooses to annul or ratify them. Note that voidable contracts are not inherently invalid but are susceptible to annulment at the discretion of the minor. The reasoning behind this rule is that minors are presumed to lack the legal capacity to fully understand the consequences of contractual obligations. As a result, the law provides them with the right to avoid or disaffirm the contract as a protective measure. However, if the minor decides to affirm or ratify the contract after reaching the age of majority, the contract becomes fully binding. Exceptions exist where minors may enter into valid contracts, such as for necessaries, such as food, clothing, and medical expenses, or in cases where the minor has misrepresented their age fraudulently.
Question number 7.
Which is the correct statement about an agency relationship under Philippine law? A. Agent can act in their own interest if they disclose it. B. The principal must always compensate the agent. C. An agent cannot appoint a subagent without the principal's permission. D. The principal and agent must have equal knowledge of the law. The correct answer is C. An agent cannot appoint a subagent without the principal's permission. Under Philippine civil law, specifically the Civil Code, an agent generally cannot appoint a subagent without the principal's permission. This principle is based on the fiduciary relationship between the principal and the agent, where the agent is entrusted with specific powers and duties that the principal has authorized them to perform personally. When an agent delegates their authority to a subagent without the principal's consent, it may violate the trust and specific intentions of the principal, who may have chosen the agent for their specific skills, judgment, or loyalty. Unauthorized delegation could also create additional risks or liabilities for the principal if the subagent acts outside the scope of the intended authority. There are exceptions, however. If the delegation is necessary for the performance of the agent's duties or if it is allowed by the nature of the agency, a subagent may be appointed. In such cases, the original agent is still typically responsible for the acts of the subagent, ensuring the principal's interests remain protected. There are exceptions, however. If the delegation is necessary for the performance of the agent's duties or if it is allowed by the nature of the agency, a subagent may be appointed. In such cases, the original agent is still typically responsible for the acts of the subagent, ensuring the principal's interests remain protected.
Question number 8.
Which of the following remedies is available to a buyer under a contract of sale when the seller fails to deliver the goods as promised? A. Rescission of the contract only. B. Specific performance or damages. C. Delivery of other goods in place of the original. D. Price adjustment. The correct answer is B. When a seller fails to deliver goods under a contract of sale, the buyer can typically demand specific performance, delivery of the goods, or claim damages for non-performance. In a contract of sale, the seller has a legal obligation to deliver the goods to the buyer as agreed. If the seller fails to fulfill this obligation, the buyer has legal remedies to ensure their interests are protected. Under Philippine civil law, these remedies include: 1. Demanding specific performance. The buyer can require the seller to deliver the goods as promised in the contract. Specific performance compels the seller to fulfill their contractual obligation exactly as agreed, provided the goods are still available and identifiable. This remedy is especially relevant when the goods are unique or have specific value to the buyer that cannot be substituted. 2. Claiming damages for non-performance. If specific performance is not feasible or the buyer chooses not to pursue it, the buyer can claim damages for any losses suffered due to the seller's failure to deliver. Damages compensate the buyer for actual loss or anticipated benefit from the goods that were not delivered, aiming to put the buyer in the position they would have been in had the contract been performed. These remedies align with the principles of protecting the buyer's interests and enforcing the contract's terms, reflecting the law's intent to honor agreements and uphold fairness between parties.
Question number 9.
What is the effect of an insolvency clause in a lease contract? A. It automatically terminates the lease upon the tenant's insolvency. B. It allows the landlord to take possession of the tenant's assets. C. It requires the tenant to pay additional rent. D. It has no effect unless specified in court. The correct answer is A. An insolvency clause generally provides that the lease will automatically terminate if the tenant becomes insolvent, allowing the landlord to recover possession of the property. An insolvency clause in a lease contract specifies the rights and remedies of the parties, particularly the lessor, if the lessee becomes insolvent or bankrupt during the lease term. Typically, this clause allows the lessor to terminate the lease or take specific actions if the lessee faces financial distress that could impact their ability to fulfill rental obligations. An insolvency clause can actually have several key effects. First and foremost, is that the clause often grants the lessor the right to terminate the lease if the lessee declares bankruptcy, files for insolvency, or becomes financially unable to meet rent payments. This protects the lessor by allowing them to release the property to a financially stable tenant. Second, some insolvency clauses permit the lessor to demand immediate payment of all remaining rent if the lessee is insolvent. This protects the lessor's financial interests by ensuring they are compensated even if the lease ends prematurely. Third, the clause helps avoid prolonged non-payment periods by giving the lessor options to act swiftly if the lessee can no longer meet financial obligations. And fourth, for lessors, an insolvency clause serves as a risk management tool, allowing them to quickly address the tenant's inability to pay and avoid complications associated with bankruptcy proceedings. By including an insolvency clause, parties clarify the outcomes and obligations in the event of insolvency, providing more certainty and security in the leasing arrangement.
Question number 10.
In a contract of suretyship, the liability of the surety is: A. Secondary and contingent upon the debtor's insolvency. B. Equal to the debtor's obligation and coextensive with it. C. Discharged automatically upon the debtor's death. D. Limited to 50% of the principal debt. The correct answer is B. In a contract of suretyship, the surety's liability is direct, immediate, and coextensive with that of the principal debtor, meaning they are equally bound to the same extent as the debtor. In a contract of suretyship, the surety guarantees the performance or payment of the debtor's obligation to the creditor. The statement, "The liability of the surety is equal to the debtor's obligation and coextensive with it," means that the surety is bound to the same extent as the principal debtor. Here are some key points in relation to a contract of suretyship. 1. The surety's liability mirrors the debtor's obligation in both scope and amount. If the debtor owes a specific amount, the surety is equally liable for that amount, along with any other terms, such as interest or penalties, tied to the obligation. The surety must fulfill the debtor's obligation if the debtor defaults. 2. The surety's obligation is considered solidary, or joint and several, with the debtor's. This means the creditor can demand payment directly from the surety without first exhausting remedies against the debtor. 3. The surety's liability is neither greater nor lesser than the debtor's, it is exactly coextensive. If the debtor's obligation changes, for example, through partial payments, the surety's liability is reduced correspondingly. This coextensive liability underscores the commitment of the surety to ensure the debt is paid or the obligation is fulfilled in full if the debtor cannot or does not do so.
You have just watched the CPA Board Exam Reviewer number 6, featuring questions on regulatory framework for business transactions, or RFBT. Check out more related review videos and playlists on our channel. If you find this useful, please like and share. Leave a comment to share your thoughts or questions regarding this reviewer or any particular part of it. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to Review Central and click the bell button to get notified of all future reviewers and updates. Like and follow us on your favorite social media platforms. Good luck to your forthcoming CPA board exam, and we look forward to your long and fulfilling career in accounting and finance.